Hi, Annabella here to talk about my 10 favorite horror movies, going in chronological order, starting with 1932, Freaks. There were so many classic horror movies in the 1930s, but Freaks makes my list. Gooba Gaba, one of us, because it is so realistic in that it starred actual circus sideshow freaks in the movie, and it was banned, very controversial at the time, and has become a classic of the horror genre, and a movie that definitely makes my top 10 list. And then 1960s, Psycho. I love Alfred Hitchcock. I love so many of his movies. My favorite Alfred Hitchcock is actually Rope, but I wouldn't categorize that as horror. Psycho is a horror classic. It is a movie that made a generation of women in the 1960s afraid to take a shower. And one of the things that makes horror so scary is when it plays upon a real fear, it plays upon reality. And there are psychos in this world, and it is a movie that terrified several generations, and I love Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. The 1973, a campy, low-budget film starring Heather Menzies, who was Louisa in The Sound of Music, very different kind of movie, and her father is a herpetologist who runs a snake farm and is turning his assistants into snakes. I grew up in a canyon in Los Angeles. We had rattlesnakes in our yard, and I am afraid of snakes. And this is a campy, just crazy horror, low budget classic, and used to show on TV all the time. Very scary. And then for us in Gen X, Jaws, the big summer blockbuster of 1975, made us afraid to go into the ocean. I grew up near the ocean. Made us afraid to go into a swimming pool. Made us afraid to even take a bath. Made us afraid of water. A classic horror summer movie blockbuster, the fantastic Jaws. The 1976 Burnt Offerings, a movie that came on TV very often with the creepiest chauffeur probably in the history of Hollywood. Movie that was terrifying, starring Karen Black, who looks scary, the fantastic, by then very elderly Bette Davis, who's also in a terrific horror thriller, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane with Joan Crawford, and also Eileen Heckart, who is in so many movies, Burgess Meredith, who we know from other horror films, Oliver Reed, who is super creepy as the stepfather in Tommy. Just this incredible cast in this low-budget haunted house. There is always a scary haunted house. Burnt Offerings from 1976. And then 1978, Magic, with a very young then Anthony Hopkins and Margaret, who's also in Tommy with Oliver Reed, and his haunted ventriloquist dummy, as we know, because it, from The Twilight Zone, from Talking Tina, to Chucky and all of the other haunted dolls that have come after it, the ventriloquist dummy in Magic. And in 1976, they played the trailers for Magic incessantly on TV. And if you were a kid sitting alone in the dark at home watching anything on TV and the trailer for Magic came on, you were terrified. I love the movie Magic. Creepy and really good fun. Then we come to the early 1990s, when there were a lot of terrific horror movies, starting with 1990, Misery. There had to be a Stephen King on the list. There's so many great adaptations of Stephen King novels. The earliest one that I remember is Carrie, but my favorite of these is Misery, because Kathy Bates is just so fantastic in Stephen King's Misery. Plays upon a fear of a stalker, of some crazy person entering your life. James Caan is terrific in that movie. I love Misery. That was next on my list. And then we have 1991, Silence of the Lambs, and in 1991 we meet Anthony Hopkins again in a movie that was truly terrifying. The first time we saw it, Jodie Foster, and playing on, again, on a real person, on Ed Gein, and then made into a fictionalized psycho person. I love Silence of the Lambs, although I must admit that upon repeated viewing over the decades, it becomes a movie that, of course, is very funny, campy, fun, but Silence of the Lambs, a true classic. 1992, Candyman, that was filmed at Cabrini Green in Chicago, that Gen X, we knew that from What's Happening. No, not What's Happening. We knew that from Good Times, the Norman Lear classic set at Cabrini Green. That complex has since been torn down. But if you were Gen X and you had slumber parties with your friends and you played Bloody Mary in a mirror, you will understand why Candyman was such a terrifying movie. Not the remakes of it, but the original from 1992. And then we come to 1999's The Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis, a movie that is so scary because it seems so natural, so normal, so something that could be really happening. It's a terrific movie, suspenseful, a terrific twist. I love The Sixth Sense. And those are my 10 favorite horror movies of all time. Bye for now.